All right, well, welcome everyone to another edition of the Cornell Cooperative Extension Campus County Connection webinar series. So this series happens typically once a month, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, but the intention is to help broaden and share the good work that's happening on campus that's connected to counties, and sometimes the good work that's not happening in counties that really connects back with campus. These webinars are really intended to be to broaden your horizons a little bit, plant some seeds, if you will. I realize we're talking about garden-based learning, but I like that. I like that analogy a lot. I use it a lot. Plant some seeds to help you think about some work that that you may be doing. So it looks like people are starting to say hello and good morning, and that's fabulous. If you can take that moment to just say good morning. Let us know where you're tuning in from. I understand that Dutchess County is snowy, so glad you can join us this morning, Joyce. Looks like Barb is here from Tioga County. Great. Yeah, keep those coming. It's nice to know who is out there. And if you have some volunteers or some others in your office, we just see one name on the webinar Zoom chat. So go ahead and add a little bit more information if you have other folks in your office as well. One thing to note is when you're using Zoom chat, there's under the to line, there's a little drop down actually. You can send a message to anyone in particular, or you can send a message to all panelists or all panelists and attendees. And I would encourage you to use the all panelists and attendees so everybody can see what you have, what you're sharing. That would be great. All right, so I don't think I said who I am. If we don't know each other, I'm Celeste Carmichael, Program Development and Accountability Specialist here in Cooperative Extension Administration. And it's always a pleasure to welcome some guests to share the good work that they're doing, and guests and friends, I should say. So Marcia Eames-Sheavly and Fiona Doherty are joining us today to talk about Cornell Garden-Based Learning, leadership reflection, and upcoming opportunities. So with that, I'm going to allow you to share your screen and jump right in. How's that sound?
That sounds great, Celeste. Let me just share our screen really quickly.
All right, and I may need to do something like stop sharing so that you can share. How's that? Very good.
Okay, let me get this in slideshow.
Perfect.
Okay.
Good.
So we can no longer see the chat box.
But I can. I'll be watching that for you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, that sounds good. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. It's not snowy here, but I think it's snowy in a lot of parts of the state. So hopefully you're hunkered down somewhere warm and cozy. My name is Fiona Doherty. I work with the Cornell Garden-Based Learning Program as our Educator Enrichment Specialist. My primary focus is providing enrichment to educators, whether it's extension educators or the communities that they work with, including teachers or informal educators, helping them improve their programs and giving them resources to enrich their programs. My focus, I would say, is mostly youth engagement, but I do dabble with adult learning as well. And Marcia is here today too. You want to introduce yourself?
I'm Marcia Eames-Sheavly, and I provide leadership for Cornell Garden-Based Learning. I share that with Lori Brewer, whom many of you know. I work very closely with Fiona. I've just really been grateful for the way she has been diving in with both feet. I teach 2 suites of distance learning courses, and increasingly one of the roles I'm playing with our program is giving students more and more opportunity here at Cornell to get real experience in extension, including a 2-semester course sequence that has students working very closely with county educators through our Seed to Supper program. So it's really nice to be here today.
Yeah. And as we've said, our program is Cornell Garden-Based Learning. So our mission is to provide educators with inspiring research-based resources and professional development opportunities that support their work in engaging their communities. So we are based here on campus in Ithaca, but we work statewide. And today we'll be diving into, I'll give you a flyover of our hour together. We'll be talking about reflection. We'll be talking about multitasking and whether that's good or bad. We'll be talking about busyness and how we are all very busy and how that impacts our work. And then we'll have some time for discussion and how all of these things that we've already talked about, reflection, busyness, multitasking, how that applies to our work in extension. We'll share some of the things that we are up to in Cornell Garden-Based Learning, and then we'll have some time for questions. Sound good? Sounds great.
So one of the things that you might have noticed in our program logo is it's Learn, Garden, Reflect. And reflection is a term I think that we bat around, sometimes even pay lip service to. But in our program, it's something that we really take seriously. We have a very small team and a whole state, and we really feel that it's important for us to pause and check in with one another. Recently, I heard someone it was a county educator who talked about how fortunate we were on campus to have that luxury, and I was a little surprised by that because, you know, I see it as something that we have to be intentional about seizing, about taking that time for reflection, because I think without it, we burn out. I'm actually Fiona's supervisor, and it's really important to me to keep her healthy and happy. So reflecting on her work-life balance is something that we do really often. I feel as a supervisor, that's one of my jobs. So before we go further, and I think this conversation is so vital. It's at the heart of so many of our concerns, and yet we're moving so quickly we don't often have the time or take the time to talk about it. So this notion of reflection, what is it? I would love to hear some of you, pause and reflect for a moment and type into the chat. When you hear this, what do you think of? We have a definition that we're going to share. It's by no means any gold standard, but just so we get on the same page when we're pausing to reflect, what are we talking about? And Celeste, I'd love to have you read as some of those start coming in. Let's hear, so that we're not just paying lip service to this. What is it? What is reflection? Why does it matter? Why do we bring it up? Why is it important? And what is it?
So this is an interactive portion of our webinar, so if you can take a moment to chat something in. I really appreciate that you brought this in, because I think about this as a lot as a former youth educator and continued 4-H leader. What we learn in the 4-H youth development process is that reflection is an important part of learning, right? And in the cognitive science and the education pieces, that's what they talk about. You can learn all you want to, you can go and take workshops and whatever, but unless you sit back and cogitate a little bit and write something down, it doesn't stick as easily. So I love this. I need to be better practice at sitting and reflecting at the end of the day and writing some comments down. I was just talking to a friend. I walk with a friend of mine in the morning, and we were kind of talking about that process of journaling or keeping those notes, and how you really do need to be disciplined to do that regularly. And once you are in that practice, it's so super useful. So the comments are starting to come in. Joyce shares, looking back to be able to proceed forward more effectively and creatively. Barb Neal shares, reflection helps me to take a step back and evaluate and reevaluate what I'm doing and what the greater framework that I'm working in is. Oh, yes. And Hannah Shaler, reflection brings to mind processing, consideration, evaluation.
Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
These are some yummy words. Keep them coming. And by the way, we're smiling here because those of you in our leadership certificate know that if you're going to engage with us in Zoom, we're going to be keeping you on your toes. We don't get very excited about us being talking heads, so we assume you don't either. And we'll be doing this periodically, encouraging you to check in. So far, what I'm hearing, I just want to, if there's any more chat, if there are any more words, feel free to share those. And while the last of you might be typing out some thoughts, I'll just reflect back to you what I heard. One of the words that Celeste used was practice. It does take practice. This is something that it's like a muscle we're flexing. You know, we wouldn't expect to have a perfect exercise routine without doing it often, and reflection is the same. It takes a kind of steady, disciplined commitment. We heard about looking back. We heard the word creatively, or being creative about, you know, this is fueling our creativity by stepping back. I heard the word greater framework from Barr. So, you know, you're stepping back so that you can see the whole. Any other words in the chat before we offer a brief, not, you know, just one definition of how we think about reflection? Anything else that you're seeing? I'm not seeing it pop up. I'm not seeing that it's live right now, but you can continue to think about that if that's something that that comes to mind for you. One more?
There is one more comment here I can read to you. And if you pull your cursor down to the bottom of your page, I wonder if chat is an option for you to see, but I'm happy to read these to you. So the one other comment that came in is, for me, reflection is to connect with myself, remembering what is important for me as an educator, mission and my involvement, what I can bring to the program.
All right. Yeah, now we can see it. Thank you, Celeste.
Yep, sure.
Well, here's how we, you know, just one way of thinking about reflection. Let me see if we
click back on the.
Click back. There we go.
There we go.
Is pausing to consider action in an effort to engage in a process of continuous learning. And I'm sure some of you have heard the well-stated perspective of John Dewey, who said that we actually don't learn by experience, through our experience. We learn when we pause to reflect on it. So we just offer that as a foundation today, taking a little bit of time before we talk about our actions, some of the things we're doing, to think about how are we reflecting together. Because in our program, again, a small program, few people, big state, we need to be reflecting so that we're putting our energy into the right place, or we feel as if we're cheating you. It's something that's really vital, that when we do a program, that we're doing one that isn't informed by scrambling, but by being thoughtful about what we are hearing from you is important to you. So with that, we'll move on with Fiona, thinking about just shifting the same conversation toward, oh, one more slide. Here are some questions that we often think about with reflection is, what happened? What's my response? How do I make sense of it? How does it relate to other things I know? What can I conclude? And then I love this one. What might I do differently next time? And if we're running so fast that we don't ever have time to pause and ask these questions, I don't think our programs grow as well as they might otherwise. We actually led a workshop, an all-day workshop, a couple of weeks ago that students have been planning since August. And I think the participants really noticed the difference in having this 2-semester course sequence. The students have really been intentional and practicing together, just the difference that made. Okay.
Excellent. There's one more. There's that John Dewey quote, right?
Yeah.
And this was a quote from someone who was in our Cornell Garden-Based Learning Leadership Certificate last year, our first cohort. We just wanted to share that they found that intentional practice of reflection to be incredibly meaningful to their work.
Yeah.
Okay, here we have another interactive question for you. So if you could respond in the chat box. Think about an activity that allows you to focus so closely on what you're doing that you completely lose your sense of time. And also think about, how do you feel when you're doing that activity? So just take a few moments to ponder this. Also realize we don't have a clock that we can see.
Okay. Behind us. Nice. Walking the dogs.
So we have walking the dogs and mowing the lawn. Someone feels happy and content when they find themselves in this focused state. Experience it when I'm building something. Nice.
I'll just say while people are putting into the chat that I feel this when I'm doing watercolor painting, that wonderful feeling of working on one and then suddenly you look up and 2 hours have gone by and it's just, so yeah, somebody wrote art in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Gardening, sewing, prepping meals. Yeah, I feel it when I cook, definitely. I love to do and make. Hiking, gardening, taking a walk. Excellent. Calms the mind and good thoughts sneak in.
Ooh.
I like that.
And there's what I'll just observe is there's no problem coming up with these. All of a sudden that chat is just filling right up with these activities. So it's wonderful to know that people are familiar with this state.
Yeah. All right. So thank you for sharing your experiences. So this term is relatively new to me, and this term is called flow. So it's that state when you're really in the zone, you're in the moment, you lose track of time, you might lose some self-awareness, you're just totally focused. And this is a state of happiness and creative achievement. It really enables us to go to the boundaries of ourselves, as focused in creativity and doing and making. And there's some science behind this state. So when we are totally focused in and zeroed in, we are able to filter out some of the external stimuli that we might normally be distracted by. But when you're in this state of flow, you are totally focused, and our brain is able to do more and really focus in and be more creative. But unfortunately, flow is becoming endangered with all of our digital stimuli that we have every day, whether it's our phones, our music, someone walking in. We all know it. We're constantly interrupted and multitasking constantly. So this means that we're unable to really find this state of flow, which is unfortunate, right? So our brain can only take in so much, and all of these stimuli, we become bottlenecked in what our brain can focus on and do. So flow is becoming less and less, and I feel it for sure when I'm working. I feel like I can find moments of flow here and there, but otherwise there's so many things that I'm multitasking on or being distracted by. And this brings us to multitasking. So multitasking is life in the shallows. Wow, it's kind of a bold statement. This is from an article that we can share with each of you maybe after the webinar. But there's science behind multitasking and how it's detrimental to our efficiency as workers, which is kind of funny because I've always thought that, the more you multitask, the more you get done and the better worker you are. So I'm trying to do all this stuff at once. But really, every time our brain switches from one task to the other, there's some lull time or some downtime. And the more that we do that, the longer that time becomes. So we actually become less efficient, which is really, really interesting. So giving yourself the gift to just focus on one thing and maybe get into that flow state, you'll be more efficient, probably more productive, and I'm going to guess much happier too as a worker. So with all of that being said, what is your reaction to that brain science that we shared? What resonates with you in regard to the science behind flow and multitasking? Feel free to chat in. Balancing them, says Joyce. Seems true.
Can you relate to it? Is this a challenge? I mean, are you feeling this as a pressing challenge in our system? I think is another thing that what we're wondering. It seems as if whenever we're talking with our peers, our colleagues, our friends, that this is the conversation these days, that excessive multitasking and its toll. Yeah.
I absolutely relate to this and see this as a challenge for myself and collaborators. Yes, a challenge for all of us. So it sounds like people are in agreement. I have become a master of multitasking, yet I get less and less satisfaction.
Wow.
Multitasking is dovetailing gone wild. Yeah, and after I read this article about flow and how multitasking is life in the shallows, I've been trying to be very intentional about where I'm focusing my time and my energy. And it is a challenge to switch and really focus on one thing at a time. And as I'm saying this, I realize I sound a little crazy, but I feel like it's just become a norm in our society and with an extension to be multitasking and doing a bunch of things at once.
Yeah, I don't think you sound crazy. I think I bet everybody here will totally agree with all of that. Switching gears it takes cognitive energy, and it makes it feel it makes it feel the good work, because it's all good. It makes it feel more exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody said serving our community, our master gardeners, and our colleagues makes interruptions constant. So flow is rarely possible. It's really tough.
Yeah. And we recognize, there's a big societal shift that has to happen with incorporating reflection and flow and trying to multitask less. But looking for those small steps that you can take to try to incorporate some healthier practices, that would be a great way to start. All right. What's next? Where'd my cursor go? There it is.
So some of you are probably wondering at this point, I thought I was tuning into a garden-based learning discussion, but this is really important to us. And we really did want to take just 20 minutes or so to be sitting with some of this, since it feels to us like the pressing issue of our times. And I really want to emphasize that it's not that we have it all figured out. In fact, I recently met with my supervisor and showed him the list of what I was doing and said, help me here, figure out what to do, because I found myself in the busy trap. It's just, as Fiona nodded to, it's so difficult not to. So an article, The Busy Trap, by Tim Kreider in the New York Times. This is several years ago, and I've been just kind of following the busy research. Believe it or not, there's a growing body that addresses the ways in which we're suffering as a culture. And I think that nowhere do I see it more potent than here on campus, among our students, among our colleagues, that people are just feeling nearly out of control. And again, we feel that it's important to talk about because I'm looking at, for example, I learned recently that 12% of our university students had seriously contemplated suicide at some point. And I think there's a link here. This intense anxiety that comes from being so busy and so overwhelmed from the multitasking that we're doing. I think as a system, it's becoming one of those issues that we don't want to sweep under the rug and that we want to address directly. So The Busy Trap was an article that talked about, if you live in America in the 21st century, you probably had to listen to a lot of people tell you how busy they are. It's almost a default response. We fall into it. How are you? Busy. I'm so busy. I'm crazy busy. And in a way, it's not a conversation at all. We can advance to that next one. I was deeply impacted by student quotes that I started reading a number of years ago that, it used to be occasional and now it's typical. Most of them are saying things like, I'm no longer to express myself. I'm too tense and too critical to let myself go. I lost the flow somewhere between the chem labs and all-nighters and term papers and prelims. to the point where it's extremely difficult to bring myself either to tears or satisfaction. I'll be honest with you, sometimes I close my door and I cry when I see what our students are expressing as their typical day-to-day experience. And they're learning that from someone. You know, I'm afraid that, yes, somebody said people wear it like a badge of honor. Linda, isn't that the truth? It's like, you know, I'm so busy. In fact, Linda, one thing that I would connect to that point is some of the latest Too Busy research suggests that it's what we connect with our self-importance, that we feel as if we're not busy, something must be wrong with us, that we don't matter, which is just a wild way to live. So let's just advance to the next slide, because Fiona's close to the clicker here. So one of the challenges I'd offer each of us, and if you're feeling at all like I'm preaching here, if I am, it's to myself primarily. I really want to make this clear that this is an ongoing conversation because of this slippery slope that we find ourselves sliding down into. I look at our students and I always feel as if they're a reflection of us because we've taught them. And one of the things I'm seeing is that when they say they're too busy, it's often actually that they don't have good time management skills, that they're really all over the place. I mean, just absolutely out of control with their time management, that they're constantly texting and multitasking. And if, you know, so is time management really an issue? I'm asking myself this question. I had a vivid moment a few years ago when a young person didn't have her cell phone with her, and she had a live encounter with a human being. It was actually a woman in healthcare that she had a conversation with. But when the woman walked in, she went to reach for her cell phone and it wasn't there. And so what she realized was, oh my gosh, I was about to pull out my phone as a way of not having to engage in a conversation with another person. So sometimes too busy is really an excuse. I can't do it because I'm too busy means I can't do it because it's not my priority. So one of the things we're doing in our program is kind of helping check each other to see if that might be what's really going on. And then lastly, I think it's worth naming Too Busy and the Misery Olympics. You know, the getting into that, whose life is more busy, and I think that we can fall into that trap. And what I think with all of these is we start to slide into something of a victim role, that we're suffering at somebody else's hand instead of saying, okay, what can I do? You know, what can I do to do something about this? So one of the things that we'd welcome is, you know, to turn the conversation. Is there anything that you've done that you know, works for you? I've talked to one colleague who carves out Friday afternoons and is like a dog with a bone without scheduling anything during that time, so that she can get caught up on what she needs to before she heads into the weekend. Anything that you do that you find is particularly helpful, we'd love to hear it. Again, I think this is a conversation we all need to be having with one another to help prevent a kind of misery Olympics and overwhelm that can become a pervasive part of our system. So those of you who are sitting back thinking, actually, I've kind of figured out something that works, wow, we'd love to hear it, and encourage you to put that in the chat.
While people are thinking and typing, one thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it was actually mentioned in our recent PDLC meeting that Celeste runs the program planning, leadership development program. Anyway, it was focused on email, and I find email to be a distraction sometimes, and sometimes a distraction that is very, very present. And one thing that I've been thinking about doing is setting, you know, chunks of time on my calendar where I check my email and reply to emails, but for the rest of the day, I'm able to really just focus and try to get into that flow state and get my work done. So I haven't tried this quite yet, but I think that it's something that I plan to incorporate, and hopefully it will help me manage my time much better.
Nice, Fiona. It looks like Celeste has found that Outlook has a work offline feature that she can use, enabling her to use email, but to close down the incoming so she can focus. Yeah, I mean, there is nothing like being in the middle of something and having it pour in.
Barb Neal says, I try to be intentionally present with whomever I work with, giving all the time and attention they need. Even if I'm super busy, which is all the time, I spend time just weeding with master gardeners and chatting with them.
Wonderful, Barb. Yay. One of the things that I do is, and I know this doesn't work for everyone, I'll just put that right out there. I get up at 5 in the morning and I spend about an hour and a half by myself. I'm a real introvert and the day takes a lot out of me, frankly. And I've found, I've been doing that for 10 years and there's something really grounding about a quiet hour and a half that is just, it's like the platform on which the rest of the day rests. Celeste used the word practice or discipline, and when I first started doing it, it felt like that, and now it's kind of like eating. It is hard to imagine not getting up and just having that quiet entry into the day. Often take a walk. It's really nice. Celeste also uses a 20-minute timer to help her focus on getting things done. So really appreciate your willing to sink into this conversation with us. It seems to undergird our work, and it feels like, again, the sickness of our day. And without addressing this, I'm afraid we'll burn out some of our most valuable employees and not enjoy the richness of our work that comes through flow. Let's see, I think there might be one more slide here in reflection. Nope. We had a deal piece.
Yeah, we did. Do you want me to bring
that
up?
We had sent out we have a deal. If you're thinking about how might I more formally draw this into work, we have a handout called DEAL. DEAL is an acronym for describing.
Why don't I bring that up?
Yeah, maybe if you share it on the screen.
Give us one moment.
We wanted to offer a tool for doing in your office, with colleagues, with your audiences. We talk about reflection, and if we want to formalize it and make it a little bit more something that we might do with others, or here's a way that we might do it. And it's just one model. It's the DEAL model for critical reflection: describe, examine, and articulate learning. So it just gets us in the habit of, you might take some recent work experience, maybe a challenging one, describe it as neutrally as you can, examine it from a personal perspective, articulate the learning, and draw from there. So this is one that you have on hand. It might be one to use. Probably if you used it, I would say with colleagues or older youth, would be helpful. So it's just getting us again in that practice, that discipline, that habit of examining our attitudes, biases, culture, just really taking a look at our learning and stretching it a little bit. Earlier, Celeste had nodded to journaling, so this is a way of putting a little bit of formal structure around that. We wanted to offer one tool that could be helpful. I'm sure that you have others. This is just one more. So again, thank you for your willingness to engage in this conversation with us. We take it seriously. We want it to be ongoing, and we welcome your thoughts well beyond and outside this webinar as we try to grow more of a culture of caring and support for one another as we juggle so much in our full lives and extension. So thank you for this part of the webinar and your responses to it.
All right, let me just hop back over to our PowerPoint. So I think we had some discussion prompts, right? Did you want to move to this?
So how are you helping your participants reflect? That's one thing that we, and how are you integrating reflection for yourself? I'm sorry, I actually overlooked that on our agenda. I was ready for Fiona to go go into the meat of the garden-based piece. But just again, to close this part of our conversation. Oh, I use yoga in the morning. Nice. Found on Cornell website, Calm College Collection, where it's free for Cornell staff with 10 minutes of meditation throughout the day. Wonderful. So just to extend this, how are you helping your participants, whether young people or adults, reflect? How might you model this? So we've kind of been focusing on ourselves, but what are you doing with participants, and how are you integrating it with them? Looks like you're sharing some things you're doing yourselves. I like the timer idea. Wonderful. That's a great one to have shared. Anything else, and anything that you would add, Fiona?
No, I'm eager to hear what people think about how they might incorporate this into their programs and help their participants reflect, whether it's young people or adults.
One of the things that I do with young people, I'll share with you, while again, some of you might be typing currently, sharing your ideas, is getting them more comfortable with silence. And that is perhaps asking a question and let it hang out there for a minute, maybe encouraging them to write a response to it before we make it a group discussion. And getting, at the last day of one of my classes here, I know that we had a final closing circle and there was a long period of silence. It almost started feeling awkward to me. And one of the participants said, no, we've learned to be a little quieter. So reflecting on our relationship with silence is another thing that we can do with our participants. Any other ideas for how you engage your participants in reflection? Yeah, helping young people just to be okay with being still for a moment, to stop and think before they speak. Wonderful. Thanks for that, Kathy. Any others?
I think about evaluation as being a natural integration for reflection too. So, being thoughtful in how you gather evaluative feedback, whether it's through a survey or through more of a journal type response, but asking questions that allow participants to do some self-reflection, as well as give you feedback on how the program went.
In our evaluation toolkit online, if you go to Cornell Garden-Based Learning and go to the evaluation toolkit, you'll see some ideas. And Fiona, that makes me think of the quick whip, where you simply go around and ask responses to what's happening as it's happening. Just get some, and it could even be, how many of you are feeling X right now, and ask for a show of hands, or otherwise just kind of take a pulse or get a litmus test on how people are feeling or processing or what they're learning in the form of just a quick whip. Our team is thinking about how we can evaluate gardeners' experiences with recommended healthy gardening practices. It's interesting to think about the role of reflection as well. Wonderful. Thank you, Hannah. Celeste has a one-pager that 4-Hers in her club fill out. What did they love? What surprised them? What will they explore next related to the topic? I know one question that I like to ask is, at what point were you distanced or confused from what was happening? I'm always surprised at that question.
Great question. Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, we will keep our eye on the chat. Thank you for those of you who chatted in. It's wonderful. Okay. So now we will just tell you a little bit about what we are up to in Cornell Garden-Based Learning and what's new with our program. So first I'll talk about some of our ongoing statewide projects. So this year's Youth Development Garden-Based Learning Project was called Seed Folks, and I believe we have 25 groups who are participating throughout the state, which is really wonderful. We left it a little open-ended for the project, so I'm eager to see how people integrate the book. And so each group gets a book, the Seed Folks book, along with some beautiful heirloom bean seeds, and they will engage their audiences. Some of them are working with local libraries to do a local reading. Some of them are working with schools. So stay tuned to see photos and other impact statements from groups who are participating in that project this year. We also and I think groups are selected and going with that, and seeds are being distributed, so we're happy to have that going again. Seed to Supper is another statewide project focused on adult education and gardening on a budget, right, Marcia?
Yeah.
So that has, how many years has that program been going on?
Seed to Supper has been going on in Oregon. It initiated with the Oregon Food Bank, but we've been at it in New York State only for a couple of years. We started in two ways. We started as we actually had a retreat with community partners to determine the direction for our New York State programs. Tompkins County, I think, was the first to initiate a program, and we also have students in a 2-semester course sequence that lead Seed to Supper garden educator preparation. And that has been really exciting to give students real experience and extension and prepare them for work in our programs.
We have our second cohort of the Cornell Garden-Based Learning Leadership Certificate, which has been going really well this year. We actively engage with some groups from around the state with monthly Zoom meetings, quite similar to how we're doing it today. Groups are working to develop programs and strengthen their programs focused in garden-based education. And they have sort of a capstone project that they're focusing on. So that's great to be able to offer that again this year. Other than that, we have an exciting symposium that's coming up this summer, the National Children and Youth Garden Symposium, hosted by the American Horticultural Society. So this is an annual conference that travels around the country. Last year it was in the greater Portland, Oregon area, and this year we are hosting it here on campus. We're very pleased, and we are excited to have quite an experience put together for attendees. So if you are interested in learning more about that, you can reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to share any details with you. But that is in July 11th to the 14th, and again, it's here on campus.
How many of you, I'd love to know how many of you are thinking of coming to that. If you might just, put in the chat interested or hope to, or would love to see if some of you out there are interested. And looks like Linda raised her hand. I don't know. So she said, okay, she's got it. Okay, I get it.
I didn't even know that was a thing you could do on Zoom.
Any scholarships offered for the symposium?
So there are scholarships, and you would work directly with the American Horticultural Society. I believe there's an application on their website. So if you just Googled ahs.org, I believe you'll get there, and their scholarship information is online. Barb's already told her Master Gardeners about it and hopes to be there. Excellent. Well, yeah, I think we expect to have a nice regional representation. Sounds like there's a lot of people who are interested in attending, if not presenting, so that's wonderful. Some other things to mention, we do offer regional educator enrichment workshops. So these workshops are really tailored to fit your community's needs, whether you're focused on starting youth gardening projects, or maybe you have an existing project and you're looking to strengthen it. You would work with me, and we would develop a workshop, whether it's a one-day, a half-day, a multi-day sort of thing. And so if you're interested in hosting one of those, reach out to me and we can work together to put something together. Jing Jing says, I would love to attend, but we'll be away this summer. It is July is a hard month. It's in that vacation time. You can even host a tour of our Seed to Supper gardens. Great. All right, so how are we doing on time here?
One thing that might be nice at this point is we focus pretty generally on reflection and flow, multitasking and being too busy, and then eased very generally into, here are the programs, here's where we're headed. This could be a lovely time simply to hear from you. Do you have a question? Is there a wondering? Is there something you want us to know? Is there a program that you wish was offered? Just generally, what's on your mind when it comes to garden-based learning that would either be helpful for us to know, or that you'd just like to learn a little bit more about, or even offer. I've fallen in love with gourd art, and I'd love to work with you on a workshop or something like that.
Yes.
So we'd love to hear from you. One of the things we said right at the beginning of this webinar was we were committed to not having this be a talking heads thing. And even if we can't hear your voices, we're really appreciating your chat. So anything on your mind, anything that you'd like to know more about, anything you'd like to collaborate with us about, that would be helpful. Maybe you'd like us to spend a few more minutes talking about a program or an aspect of one of our curricula that would be helpful. We'd love to hear from you.
So I'm going to jump in as folks may be typing, and just ask if there are folks that, if they're a garden-based learning educator, they may already know the answer to this, but just in case there's somebody that doesn't, are there program work teams or other ways that people can be engaged in helping to make some decisions and figure out what's next of garden-based learning? What are the roots, or what's the framework within the garden-based learning program?
I'll just jump in and say I do think that, again, we're such a small program that probably the easiest route is accessing us directly.
Mm-hmm.
Fiona has been so instrumental in county and regional workshops. That's not to say that the program work teams aren't a wonderful way to connect. I know we were recently talking about strengthening our STEM offerings and that sort of thing, but we're an intimate program, and we really appreciate that one of the foundations in extension is relational trust and relationship building. We sure hope that we're pretty accessible.
Yeah. If you ever have an idea you'd like to throw by us, just give us a call or shoot us an email. I will be putting together a survey, I think maybe in May, to gather input on, how have we been doing so far with our offerings? What would you like to see? What would help you in your job day to day? I think when I first started here about 2 years ago, I sent out one of those surveys, but I feel like it's time for another one. Hannah Shaler would like to see some opportunities for collaboration with healthy soils, healthy communities, boosting extension resources and connections. Yeah, Hannah, definitely.
Sounds great.
Got my pen ready. I'm writing things down.
A natural bridge there. Yay. Sounds good. Thank you. Our region loved the regional GBL training we had last year, and I get asked if we're holding another this year. Attendees had a lot of fun, but I see also made a ton of connections. That's really good to hear, Linda. I'm not surprised with your good enthusiasm that you're fueling those connections. That's really terrific. No reason to not build on one training by offering another.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to come back to the Adirondacks, one of my favorite parts of the state. When will the AHS conference be more fleshed out in terms of workshops, tours, etc.? Great question. So registration is opening in April, and we have just a few weeks. I know Catherine from AHS is working to update the website. I'd say in the past week or so, we've been tying up a lot of loose ends. So things that were amorphous are now getting more shaped. So soon, very soon, keep checking. Yeah.
And one of the things I'll just say, Fiona has been working very closely with AHS, and it's a kind of an interesting dance when we host this kind of event, because it's really their event. Mm-hmm. We're hosting it. We're it's here, but they do select the programs, choose the speakers, and all of that sort of thing. So it's just important to be aware of that. You know, it's a really interesting relationship as it unfolds.
Great questions so far. Keep them coming.
Yeah, any other observations, wonderings, offerings, requests? Really appreciate your diving in today and conversing with us in this way.
While we're waiting for some more thoughts to come in, for those of you who don't know much about our program, Cornell Garden-Based Learning, and you're wondering what kind of things we have to offer, if you go onto our website, we have a bounty of activities and curriculum that you can use in engaging your audiences. We also have a lot of program development tools. So Marcia mentioned the evaluation toolkit earlier. That's a treasure trove right there. And there's also a lot of tools that will help you start a program or strengthen an existing program. We have a garden guidance area on the website, and we kind of view that as a platform for all of Cornell's horticulture resources. So if you go on there, it'll bring you to other websites, such as Hannah's Healthy Soils, Healthy Communities websites. What else do we have on there? And then information on any statewide projects that you could get involved with and things like that.
I do. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask if you want to do a quick tour. I don't know what else you have planned for this group, but if you want to do a quick tour of where to find resources and what they look like, that probably would be worthwhile. And you also have a question about probably need training on using the Moodle for Seed to Supper. I don't know if you saw that.
From Barb.
Okay, good to know. We anyway, yes, that we will hold that in mind.
And Hannah asked if we are familiar with the work of, I'm not, Manoush?
No. Oh, Bored and Brilliant. Yes, I've heard about that book. Wonderful. Thank you.
So we
for
have
sharing
a
that
recommendation
resource.
for everyone to check out a podcast, Note to Self, in the book Bored and Brilliant. Thank you, Hannah. I haven't heard of either of those, so some homework for me.
Great. Yay.
Okay, and with our last few minutes here, I will give you a snapshot of the Cornell Garden-Based Learning website. It's taken a little bit to load for some reason.
As Fiona is loading this up, if you sense a little delay or a little bit of quiet time, like we haven't packed this webinar full because we felt if we did, we would not be putting our money where our mouth is. We really wanted some spaciousness. And so here in the remaining minutes, we're glad to share our website, but we didn't want to pack this so full we didn't have room to hear from you.
Okay.
You're welcome, Hannah. Thank you.
So here we are. This is the landing page of the website, and you see the URL is gardening.cals.cornell.edu. And again, we have it kind of broken down, so you're not sure where to begin. If you're a teacher or a volunteer, these are some resources that you might find to be helpful, or maybe you focus on youth development, so we have some other resources listed out. I really like that part of the website because I think sometimes you get onto a page and you just think, where do I go? So that gives you some direction to work with. Again, our program tools, so planning and organizing, we have a lot of benefits and research that have been collected over the years focused on why garden-based learning even matters, so there's some hard science behind gardening and the benefits of engaging youth and adults and families in the garden setting. So that's where you can find that research. Our programs don't run without funding, so here are some resources focusing on fundraising and promotion, and then there's that evaluation toolkit that we mentioned. Under lessons, you'll find our bounty of activities and curricula. So these range from things that you could do in just a few hours with a group to things that you could engage a group with through a month or so. So anything ranging from the little guys, so young children or teenagers. And then our garden guidance page. So this will launch you into other Cornell gardening resources. Citizen science, we have a few citizen science resources, so ways that you can engage your communities in collecting data. And then this last tab for CCE staff provides you with a greater look at, oh, well, I want to engage with Cornell garden-based learning, but I'm not sure who to reach out to, whether it's Marcia, Fiona, or Lori, our colleague. So this gives you a better idea of what each of us focuses on. There's some information about the Master Gardener Volunteer Network here, any e-lists that you could subscribe to, and down here are our emerging statewide projects.
So lots of great information there. And let me just ask you, so I see an FAQ there, so you do have some frequently asked questions that are there, which might be helpful for educators or volunteers, right? Because I'm sure that kind of will help them dive and find the resources that they're looking for. And if anybody has any follow-up questions, I'm sure they can follow up with either of you. Is that right?
Of course, yes.
Sound right? Awesome. Well, thank you. I want to thank you both very much for sharing this presentation, not just only about the information and how to connect and reconnect, but the reality of who we are and how we work, and how we're all struggling to work with so many things on the plate, right? The meatballs fall off of the spaghetti a lot. So, and it's hard not to, you can't just kick them off or not invite them, even if they're veggie meatballs or whatever, the plates are heaped high on any, whether it's home or work or, yeah. So I think just understanding that it's not uncommon and that there's ways around managing is really super, super awesome. So in the last couple of minutes that we have, I would like to bring us to, let's see if I can find see where are you looking at my browser screen staff site?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sometimes I'm not sure what pops up. I don't see a little green box around it, so I wasn't sure. But I want to thank you all for joining us for Campus County Connection webinar, and I just want to bring you back and show you where you can find these resources again. So the Cooperative Extension staff site, if you're a staff member, it's available to you. If you're out of your office, you do need to use VPN to get into the staff site. It is for no good reason that I can understand, so we could commiserate about this, but it's protected. It's under protection, so you have to be in VPN if you're not at your office. I often hear people say, I can't find it, it won't open, and that is why. So if you're out of your office, use VPN and then you can get in. Under units, if you look at the longest name, and almost the last but not the least, organizational development and accountability, that's kind of everything that you see that happens out of the unit that I work out of, which includes our program unit. Our staff page includes little promos in the form of little Twitter feeds. Even if you're not on Twitter, you can kind of see the short version of all of those, including update on upcoming system conference. So if you haven't registered for that, I would encourage you to do that. And then on the right side, on the very top, is Campus Program Connections. If you open that link, you will see today's workshop as well as anything else that's up and coming. So in May, we have the intergenerational program, which is going to be the feature and the focus. So I encourage you to register for that and join us. And after today's conference webinar, the recording will be posted on here as well. And then it lives forever, or at least for our forever, on our Campus Connection website. It has resources that are connected as well as the recording. And they're kind of organized over here on the left-hand side by major programmatic topics. So this one may live in a variety of sections, but you'll be able to find it and visualize and watch and listen to the recording if you want to, and find the references there as well. So that's all I have. Oh, one last thing. When you close out, you'll have a little evaluation form. So if you could just take a moment to let us know if this was helpful, and if you have any future topics or suggestions, let me know that as well. So let's see. Anything else for the good of the whole?
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your participation.
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks for taking some time with us today.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you, Fiona and Marcia. As always, great to have you as a partner in all of this.
Thanks for inviting us, Celeste.
Yep, thanks everybody. We'll see you again next month.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, I am going to